Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. We are in Parshat Miketz, which is in the book of Genesis, beginning with chapter 41, verse 1. We'll read through our English translation of our Torah portion, and then I'll share with you a little bit of a focus study, and then we'll open it up for our collective conversation with sharing our insights and our thoughts, questions, and reflections. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute at this point, we can say our blessing for this opportunity of being together in the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok divrei Torah. Thank you very much, everyone. We thank God for this moment of immersing ourselves, words and deeds and relationships of Torah. And in addition, Hanukkah Sameach, everyone. Happy Hanukkah. And in fact, we're going to see how aspects of what we're going to be studying this evening relate to the holiday of Hanukkah. For now, let's turn to chapter 41, the book of Genesis, verse 1. I'll share with you the opening verses, and then we'll each have the opportunity to read some more. After 2 years' time, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile. When out of the Nile, there came up 7 cows, handsome and sturdy, and they grazed in the reed grass. Presently, 7 other cows came up from the Nile close behind them, ugly and gaunt, and stood beside the cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, gaunt cows ate up the 7 handsome, sturdy cows, and Pharaoh awoke. Anna, would you like to read some on verse 5?
He fell asleep and dreamt a second time. This time, 7 ears of grain were growing on a single stalk. They were healthy and good. And then 7 ears of grain, thin, scorched by the east wind, grew after them. The 7 ears of grain that were thin and scorched by the east wind then swallowed the 7 ears of grain that were healthy and full. And Pharaoh woke up. Behold, it was a dream.
It's 40, 22.
And now we're on chapter 41, verse 8. Richard, would you like to read a little?
Next morning, thank you, his spirit was agitated, and he sent for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but none could interpret them for Pharaoh. The chief cupbearer then spoke up and said to Pharaoh, I must make mention today of my offenses. Once Pharaoh was angry with his servants and placed me in custody in the house of the chief steward together with the chief baker. We had dreams the same night, he and I, each of us a dream with a meaning of its own. A Hebrew youth was there with us, a servant of the chief steward. And when we told him our dreams, he interpreted them for us, telling each the meaning of his dream. And as he interpreted for us, so it came to pass. I was restored to my post, and the other was impaled.
Thank you, Richard. June, would you like to read a little bit, beginning at verse 14?
Thank you, Rabbi. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee, that when thou hearest a dream, thou canst interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh spoke unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the lean and ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning. So I awoke. Shall I continue?
Please, thank you.
And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up upon one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears, withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me.
Thank you so much, June. Mark Thompson, would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 25?
Yes. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows are 7 years, and the 7 healthy ears are 7 years. It is the same dream. The 7 lean and ugly cows that followed are 7 years, as are also the 7 empty ears scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I have told Pharaoh. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Immediately ahead are 7 years of great abundance in all the land of Egypt. After them will come 7 years of famine, and all the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten. As the land is ravaged by famine, no trace of the abundance will be left in the land because of the famine thereafter, for it will be very severe. As for Pharaoh having had the same dream twice, it means that the matter has been determined by God and that God will soon carry it out.
Thank you, Mark. Dave, would you like to read beginning at verse 33?
Accordingly, let Pharaoh find a man of discernment and wisdom, and set him over the land of Egypt. And let Pharaoh take steps to appoint overseers over the land and organize the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. Let all the food of these good years that are coming to be gathered, and let all the grain be collected under Pharaoh's authority as food to be stored in the cities. Let that food be a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which will come upon the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish in the famine. The plan pleased Pharaoh and all his courtiers. And Pharaoh said to his courtiers, could we find another like him, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is none so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my court, and by your command shall all my people be directed. Only with respect to the throne shall I be superior to you. Pharaoh further said to Joseph, see, I put you in charge of all the land of Egypt. And removing his signet ring from his hand, Pharaoh put it on Joseph's hand, and he had him dressed in robes of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in the chariot of his second command, and they cried before him, Abrek. Thus he placed him over all the land of Egypt.
Thank you so much, Dave. Margot, would you like to read starting at verse 44? Margot?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, verse 44.
Yes, I'm happy to. Thank you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, yet without you, no one shall lift up a hand or a foot in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh then gave Joseph the name Zepheth. How do you pronounce that?
Paneah.
Paneah. And he gave him for a wife Asaph, daughter of Popera, priest of On. Thus Joseph emerged in charge of the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh and king of Egypt. Leaving Pharaoh's presence, Joseph traveled throughout all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced in abundance, and he gathered all the grains of the 7 years that the land of Egypt was enjoying, and stored the grain as in the cities. And he put in each city a grain, the grain of the field, of the field around it. Joseph collected Joseph collected produce in very large quantities, like the sands of the sea, until he ceased to measure, and it could not be measured.
Thank you, Margot. And Gary, would you like to read starting in verse 50?
2 sons were born to Joseph before the years of famine arrived, born to him by Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Joseph named the firstborn son Manasseh, for God has made me forget all the troubles I endured in my father's house. And he named the second one Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of plenty that prevailed in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, as Joseph had foretold. There was famine in all the lands, but all over the land of Egypt there was food, yet all the land of Egypt was starving, so that the people cried out to Pharaoh for food. Pharaoh said to all of Egypt, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he tells you." The famine had spread across the land, so Joseph opened up all that was in the stores, and he provided for Egypt, for the famine had gained strength in the land of Egypt. And all lands came to Egypt to buy provisions from Joseph, for the famine had taken hold in every land.
Thank you so much, Gary. Paul, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 42?
Let's separate the pages here. Thank you, Rabbi. Jacob perceived that there were provisions in Egypt. So Jacob said to his sons, why do you make yourselves conspicuous? And he said, behold, I have heard that there are provisions in Egypt. Go down there and purchase for us from there, that we may live and not die. So Joseph's brothers, 10 of them, went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob, did not send along his brothers, for he said, lest disaster befall him. So the sons of Israel came to buy provisions among the arrivals, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the viceroy over the land. He was the provider to all the people of the land. Joseph's brothers came and they bowed to him, faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger toward them and spoke with them harshly. He asked them, "For where do you come?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph recalled the dreams that he dreamed about them. So he said to them, "You are spies. To see the land's nakedness have you come?" They answered him, "Not so, my lord, for your servants have come to buy food. All of us, sons of one man are we. We are truthful people. Your servants have been spies, never been spies." And he said to them, "No, but the land's nakedness have you come to see?" And they replied, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the son of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest one is now with our father, and one is gone." But Joseph said to them, "It's just as I have declared to you. You are spies, but by this shall you be tested. By Pharaoh's life, you will not leave here unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him fetch your brother while you shall remain imprisoned, so that your words may be tested whether truth is with you. But if not, by Pharaoh's life, surely you are spies." Then he herded them into a ward for a 3-day period.
Thank you so much, Paul. Tom and Jackie, would you like to start reading at verse 18?
On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and live. I am a God-fearing man. If you're an honest man, let one of your brothers be confined in your place of custody, while you go bring provisions to relieve the starvation of your families. Then bring your youngest brother to me, and let your words be proven trustworthy, so that you may not die." They went to do this. The brothers said to one another, "Oh, we are being punished on account of our brother. We saw his soul's distress when he pleaded with us, but we didn't listen. On that account, this distress has come upon us." Reuben now responded to them, saying, "Didn't I say so? Do not sin against the lad." But you wouldn't listen. So his blood payment, it has come due.
He did not know that Joseph understood, for the interpreter had been between them. He left them and wept. Then he came back to them, spoke to them, took Simeon from them, and bound him before their eyes. Joseph gave the command. They were to fill their bags with grain, and his men were to return each one silver to his sack and give them provisions for the road. Thus he did to them. They loaded their provisions on their asses and went away. When at the night lodging, one of them opened his sack to give fodder to his ass, he saw his silver. It was in the mouth of his bag. When he said to his brothers, "My silver has been returned. Look, it's in my bag." Their hearts gave out, and trembling, they turned to each other and said, "What is this that God has done to us?"
Thank you so much, both of you. And let me invite Jay Iser. Would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 29?
Thank you, Rabbi. When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had befallen them, saying, "The man who is Lord of the land spoke harshly to us and accused us of spying on the land. We said to him, 'We are honest men, we have never been spies.' There were 12 of us brothers, sons by the same father, but one is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of Canaan. But the man who is Lord of the land said to us, 'By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take something for your starving households and be off. And bring your youngest brother to me, that I may know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will then restore your brother to you, and you shall be free to move about in the land.' As they were emptying their sacks, there in each one's sack was his money bag. When they and their father saw their money bags, they were dismayed. Their father Jacob said to them, 'It is always me that you bereave. Joseph is no more, and Shimeon is no more, but now you would take away Benjamin. These things always happen to me.' Then Reuben said to his father, 'You may kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you.' But he said, 'My son must not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he alone is left. If he meets with disaster on the journey you are taking, you will send my white head down to Sheol in grief.'"
Thank you, Jay. And David and Susan, would you like to read the start of chapter 43?
Yes, thank you very much. And the famine grew grave in the land. And it happened, when they had eaten up the provisions they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, "Go back, buy us some food." And Judah said to him, saying, "The man firmly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' If you are going to send our brother with us, we may go down and buy you food. But if you are not going to send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' And Israel said, 'Why have you done me this harm, to tell the man you had another brother?' And they said, 'The man firmly asked us about ourselves and our kindred, saying, "Is your father still living? Do you have a brother?" And we told him in response to these words, could we know he would say, "Bring down your brother"? And Judah said to Israel, his father, send the lad with us and let us rise and go that we may live and not die, neither we nor you nor our little ones. I will be his pledge. From my hand you may see him. If I do not bring him to you and set him before you, I will bear the blame to you for all time.
For if we hadn't delayed, by now we would have come back twice. And Israel, their father, said to them, if that's how it is, then do this. Take some of the best fruit of the land in your containers and take a gift down to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum and myrrh, pistachios and almonds, and take double the silver in your hand and take back in your hand the silver that was put back in the mouth of your bags. Maybe it was a mistake. And take your brother and get up and go back to the man. And may El Shaddai give you mercy before the man, so he will send your other brother and Benjamin to you. And I, if I'm bereaved, I'm bereaved. And the men took this gift and took double the silver in their hand and Benjamin, and got up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And Joseph saw Benjamin with them and said to the one who was over his house, bring the men to the house and slaughter and prepare an animal, because the men will eat with me at noon. And the man did as Joseph said, and the man brought the men to Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, we're being brought on account of the silver that came back in our bags the first time, in order to roll us over and fall upon us and take us as slaves and our asses. And they went over to the man who was over Joseph's house and spoke to him at the entrance of the house and said, please, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food, and when we came to the lodging place and we opened our bags, and here was each man's silver in the mouth of his bag, our money and its full weight. And we brought it in our hand, and we brought down additional silver in our hand to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in our bags. And he said, peace to you, don't be afraid. Your God and your father's God put treasure in your bags for you. Your silver came to me. And he brought Simeon out to them.
Thank you so much, both of you. We're now on verse 24. Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house. He gave them water to bathe their feet, and he provided feed for their asses. They laid out their gifts to await Joseph's arrival at noon, for they had heard that they were to dine there. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts that they had brought with them into the house, bowing low before him to the ground. He greeted them and said, how is your aged father of whom you spoke? Is he still in good health? They replied, it is well with your servant our father. He is still in good health. And they bowed and made obeisance. Anna, would you like to read a little verse 29?
He looked up and saw his full brother Benjamin, his mother's son. And he said, is this your youngest brother you told me about? And he added, God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph hurried out, for he was so deeply stirred with tender warmth toward his brother that he wanted to weep. He went into an inner chamber, and there he wept. He washed his face, and when he came out, he held himself in check and said, serve food. They served him separately, and them separately, and the Egyptians who usually ate with him separately, for the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, since it was an abomination to the Egyptians. As they were seated before him, the firstborn according to his seniority, and the youngest according to his youth, the men looked at each other in amazement. He presented portions of food to them from what was in front of him. Benjamin's portion exceeded all of theirs fivefold, and they drank and grew drunk with him. Afterward, he commanded the one in charge of his household, saying, fill the men's bags with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his bag. And he put my goblet, the silver goblet, in the mouth of the youngest one's bag, along with the silver for his grain. He did just as Joseph instructed.
Thank you so much, Anna. Richard, would you like to read there, starting at verse 3?
Yes, Rabbi. When the first light of morning, with the first light of morning, the men were sent off with their pack animals. They had just left the city and had not gone far when Joseph said to his steward, up, go after them. And when you overtake them, say to them, why did you repay good with evil? It is the very one from which my master drinks and which he uses for divination. It was a wicked thing for you to do. He overtook them and spoke these words to them. And they said to him, why does my Lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything of the kind. Here we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money that we found in our mouths of our bags. How then could we have stolen any silver or gold from your master's house? Whichever of your servants is found with shall die. The rest of us, moreover, shall become slaves forever of your my Lord. He replied, although what you are proposing is right, only the one with whom it is found shall be my slave, but the rest of you shall go free. So each one hastened to lower his bag to the ground, and each one opened his bag. He searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the goblet bag turned up in Benjamin's bag. And with this they rent their clothes, each reloaded his pack animal, and they returned to the city.
Thank you so much, Richard. And then, Gary, would you like to read from verse 14 to the end of our portion?
With pleasure. Judah and his brothers entered Joseph's house. He was still there. They fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what is the deed that you have done? Did you not know a man like me constantly practice divination? Judah replied, what can we say to my lord? How speak and how justly ourselves? God has found out the inequity of your servants. Here we are, my lord's slaves, both we and the one who was caught with the goblet in his possession. But he said, far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the goblet was found, he shall be my slave. And the rest of you, go up in peace to your father.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. I'd like to share with you a little bit of focus study, and then we'll open it up for a collaborative conversation. So if you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out now. And I'd like to just begin by looking at the painting that's at the very top by an artist named Heather Ernst. And I'd like to just ask you how you react to this image. What do you see in that painting? How do you respond to it? If you'd like to raise your hand, I'd love to call on you and hear what you have to say. Yes, David.
Reaction number one is Big Bang. And reaction number two is that the little, at least the blue shards that are flying around remind me strongly of the little Christmas lights I was putting up today outside my house.
Okay, that's very nice. Thank you. Richard?
Looking at it now, I see the light in the middle, and it's as though the outer place, whatever this thing is, has burst out to show the light within.
Okay, thank you. And Dave Led? Go ahead, and you have to unmute Dave.
That kind of reminds me of a seed pod, which is bursting open, and all these seeds are ejected from the pod to scatter around the earth.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, and Anna?
It reminds me, the blue part, the margins, remind me of the midrash of how God created the earth of the alphabet, all the letters fell from heaven and assembled themselves up to form creation. And it just seems like you begin to see the shapings of the smeared white ink or paint in the blue of the alphabet coming down.
Very nice, thank you. And anyone else, how you react to this painting, Paul?
Yeah, if it's an explosion, it bothers me that there seems to be two of them. And that bothers me, because if one goes off, the other one didn't have a chance. But anyway, that's because I have my background.
Very good, Kate. And anyone else, how you react to the painting, what you see there? Okay. Okay, June, go ahead and unmute and share.
You know, I'm reading a book now about the disaster of Flight 707. And that's the first thing that came to me of a plane exploding in the sky and all the pieces falling down. It's not a pleasant thought, but that's what hit me here.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And anyone else? So it's very interesting. We have a number of comments, all having to do with this representing some aspect of procreativity, some of light coming into existence, the Big Bang, a seed pod, creation through the flowing down of the Aleph Bet. So that's one image that is characterized by a sense of life coming into existence. And then, very interestingly enough, we have some comments that are kind of in a sense, the opposite, that of danger, of an explosion, of a rending, of a disaster. So very interesting that we have these contrasting images that you've shared with all of us. One set having to do with birth, and in a sense, the other having to do with death. Okay, so let's kind of hold on to all those notions as we look at our study sheet, the theme of which is brokenness and imagination. So the painting is entitled Shattered by Heather Ernst. And here is a comment that she herself wrote about the painting. The synapses in our minds carry the sparks of imagination. And that's where it all comes from. We create that which carries the earth through time. So the artist Heather Ernst here is playing with the notions that you've all shared, which is that when we think of the notion of shattered, we think of something that is coming to an end, that something has broken and has reached the end of its existence, if you will, or perhaps something has been lost, irretrievably lost. And on the other hand, she's also playing with the notion that maybe when we talk about something shattering, that we're not talking about something dying or coming to the end of its existence. Maybe we're talking about something that's coming into existence, a birthing, if you will. And that's when she picks up on this notion of the synapse, because a synapse, and I'm sure among all of us who are engaged in this study tonight, everyone is far better versed than I am in matters of neurobiology. But basically, a synapse, as I understand it, is this very minute gap that exists between nerve cells, and then across that very narrow gap, pass these impulses by diffusion of a neurotransmitter. So she's saying the fact that there's a shattering, that there's a gap, doesn't necessarily mean that something has been broken and thereby coming to the end of its existence. It actually, in her sense, has the capacity for having these charges, these electrical charges crossing across this gap, and therefore it represents for her a kind of source of energy. So when I read this commentary that she had about her own work of art, it got me to thinking a little bit more about synapses and exactly what do they mean and how do they operate. And I stumbled across this article that's in number 2 here by these scientists called the Neurobiology of Imagination, which is in a magazine called Frontiers in Psychology. And they are playing with this notion about what happens with neurobiology and the kind of electrical charges that cross across the gaps in our nerves. And they draw a distinction between imagery and imagination, which they say sometimes often get conflated or confused, as if they are synonymous, imagery and imagination. And they say this about those two terms. They say imagery is the production of images of previously experienced material. Imagination is the power of forming mental images of what is not actually present or has never been actually directly experienced. So in their article, they're trying to draw some lessons about the role that synapses play in the support of imagination, which is bringing into existence something that's really never been encountered before or has never existed before. So we're going to play a little bit with this notion about a gap, brokenness, and bringing something new into existence. And so for that, we look at number 3. And in our Torah portion, it says that Jacob saw that there was Shever in Egypt. And we're going to play a little bit through Midrash with this word, which is spelled with these three Hebrew letters, Shin, Beit, Resh. And what our Midrash is going to kind of share with us is that you take those 3 same consonants, and depending upon how you vocalize them, that is, how you articulate them, you can come up with 2 different words. And the word shever means corn or a grain. And it comes from the Hebrew verb, which means to break into pieces. So you can see how this notion about breaking into constituent parts gives us a notion about grain or corn. But if you pronounce the word, instead of pronouncing it as shever, if you pronounce it as sever, you come up with the word hope, because the word savar, the verb means to inspect or examine or to wait or to hope. So our Midrash is going to play with these 2 different ways of articulating the same 3 consonants. And here's what the Midrash says. There was Shever in Egypt, meaning that there was brokenness, there was famine, and there was Sever, that is, there was plenty. There was Shever, because Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, so the family was broken. There was also Sever, for Joseph had become a ruler. That is, so there was both brokenness, and at the same time, there was hope. And it was all a result of the same exact experience and action and phenomenon that had taken place. That is the separation of Joseph from his family. So we're going to kind of look a little bit more about this connection and relationship between something being broken and something being hopeful, something being shattered and something being something new coming out of this shattering. So if you turn over the study sheet, what I have here in number 4 is a little bit of my own articulation of this concept that's in Kabbalah called Shivirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. So number 4, the shattering of the vessels, Shivirat HaKelim, does not signify a flaw in the creative process. On the contrary, it serves a very specific and important purpose, which is to bring about a state of separation or partition of the light into distinct qualities and attributes, and thereby introduce diversity and multiplicity into creation. So one way of viewing this Kabbalistic notion that when the world is created through the Big Bang, as someone mentioned, you could think of it as a tragic event, that what was once whole has now been shattered into pieces, like the breaking of a glass, and that's turns out to be, could be seen as a disaster. But Kabbalah says, not necessarily. What's happening is the unity that we might call God, the unity of the universe, has now been refracted into its multiple constituent parts. And that's not a bad thing. This is a world of multiplicity. And when things are shattered like that, what it does is it gives us beings in this dimension this opportunity to see that the whole is made up of distinct parts. And our spiritual practice, if you will, is to see back to the unity that all these constituent parts are made up of, to see that the origin of this multiplicity is a unity, and thereby to act accordingly, because we want to treat each aspect of existence as having come from this unity, and thereby deserving of the kind of respect that one would treat the unity itself. And so our job is, in a sense, to weave back this into a fabric of wholeness, all these constituent parts. And we do that both in our relationship with other people. I see that you are a distinct aspect of that unity that I too am a part of, and thereby I should treat you accordingly. And then we also deal with our own selves in the same manner. We look inside of ourselves and we see that we're made up of many different urges and yearnings and aspirations. And rather than trying to eliminate one of those, we try and weave them back together into some kind of constituent whole personality. So I have here in number 5 a quote from an author, Philip Yancey, who's a Christian writer who infuses a lot of his writings with his Christian spirituality. And this is from a book he wrote called Reaching for the Invisible God, What Do We Expect to Find? And he writes, in the presence of certainty, who would need faith at all? If you look at the world as being made up of, just being made up of some singularity, then that gives you you don't have any sense of different perspectives. It gives you a sense of being able to anticipate everything, because everything is quite singular. There's just a single meaning. And he says, if that's the way you live life with a complete certainty, in his perspective, what would you need faith for? Well, we've talked about faith in some of our previous sessions. And in the Jewish tradition, faith is not so much a passive acceptance, but it's an act of human initiative. And so what Torah takes us through, in a sense, is a series of uncertainties, a series of ambiguities, a series of doubt, because that sets us on a path of trying to reconstitute into this unity all these moments of doubt and ambiguity. It provokes us to try and seek out the meaning, and that's our human initiative, and that's our weaving project, if you will. So here is what Joseph is doing in our Torah portion within this kind of perspective. So we have here in chapter 42, verses 7 through 8, says, when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, and he made himself strange to them. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. So the key word here, which is in the bold type, which says, Joseph, Vayar Yosef et Echav, Joseph saw his brothers, Vayakirem Vayit Naker, which is he recognized them, but he made himself strange to them. So what does it mean to make oneself strange? So what Joseph here is doing is he could have easily said at the very beginning, just start out by saying, I'm Joseph, I'm your brother. And he either could have said, and I'm so glad we're back together, or he could have said, and I hate you all because of what you did to me. But instead, what he does is he makes himself strange to them. He breaks up. He by intention, he fractures this moment. He breaks up this possible continuity between himself and his brothers. And that continuity, we're going to see for this exercise that he engages in of making himself strange, of breaking the contact between himself and his brothers. We're going to see the fulfillment of that exercise in next week's Torah portion. But just a little bit of spoiler, which is that it's going to initiate a profound reunification on a whole new level between Joseph and his family, and within the family itself. So Joseph engages in this exercise of fracturing, of breaking, and his reason for doing that in this way of perceiving the Torah portion is to create something that has never existed before, a brand new relationship within the family. Now, how does that relate to Hanukkah? Because we're reading this during Hanukkah, and I know at the top of our study sheet that tonight is the 5th night of Hanukkah. So Hanukkah, in our Jewish texts, has a variety of interpretations about what it's all about. One interpretation is that it was a great military victory in which the Maccabees defeated the Seleucid Empire and regained political control over the land of Israel. The second book of Maccabees kind of de-emphasizes that and says what it was a great rededication of the temple, a reclaiming and revival of religious freedom and of religious ritual and practice. And then we have at least a third, which appears in the Talmud, which completely ignores those first two and basically says, what this is all about is that the oil that the Maccabees found in the temple, which was enough to just last one night, lasted 8 nights. It was a miracle produced by God. So we have these at least three different interpretations of what Hanukkah is about. In other words, our tradition breaks into several constituent parts this holiday of Hanukkah. And it does that because it's trying to teach us that reality itself has multiple dimensions to it. And we can either choose to try and say, no, there just must be one meaning to what this holiday is all about. And tradition instead is telling us, well, it's not so simple. There are different levels to what's going on here, and each level has a value to it. Each level has a meaning to it. Each level has a lesson to teach us. So I share with you this quotation from Rabbi Jonathan Sacks from his book, Dignity of Difference. The test of faith is whether I can make space for difference. Can I recognize God's image in someone who is not in my image, whose language, faith, ideals are different from mine? If I cannot, then I have made God in my image instead of allowing him to remake me in God. What Hanukkah is teaching us, what our Torah portion is teaching us, and I think what Torah in general is teaching us, is to see diversity within the apparent unity and to see unity within the apparent diversity. And with that, I would love to hear all of your diverse opinions, reflections, and thoughts about this week's Torah portion. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I think there's something about the painting and what you did tonight kind of explains since I've been joined this group, what's going on in terms of how the Hebrew language is made up of 3 letters. And so that you look as the beginning. And then we start attaching pieces to it here and there, and suddenly you get other words. Now, the moment you start off with that, where you go from 3 and then you're allowed to wander off into other areas, you are free then to really come up with what I enjoy about the group is I typically go for the first meaning. But what I enjoy about the group is that it allows the group to wander and get other messages out. And so what I see is in that picture that starts off with only one item, the 3 letters, it's okay to wander a little bit.
Very nice. Thank you. Okay. And David and Susan?
It's both of us. Susan first.
Well, it's kind of both of us. We both had the same response, especially when you read number 3 about the shattering, that the breaking of the glass at a wedding ceremony, it's always described kind of in a very negative context. And as with this, it sounds like a very positive shattering into hope in the future. And we can also say that Deborah's engaged to be married.
Wow! Welcome.
And has a wedding gift.
Yeah. Richard just said they're breaking the news. Okay.
Nice.
So let me carry that out a little further or differently. From the beginning, from the art, which, as I said, reminded me of the Big Bang and a shattering, and throughout your drash, I've been thinking like this. There's a Zen teaching that I'm certain is in Kabbalah somewhere, or many places, that when you destroy something, you complete something, you create something. And it's just like watching an Escher drawing or something like that. You look at it one moment, it's this way, and another moment, it completely switches and you clearly see it in the other way. So if you take a bunch of explosions and blow up the World Trade Center and everything falls to the ground and creates a big pile, one way of looking at that is, wow, we made a big, interesting pile here. In that sense, destruction and creation, it's not that destruction leads to creation, it is a kind of creation as well. And the drash, our discussion, your teaching is making me think mostly about how creative and birth-like these things are. So now, the smashing of the glass, which has always been a little bit of a puzzle to me in our ceremony, and people mostly tell me what it means is it's in remembrance of the destruction of the temple, can also be seen as a remembrance of the creation of the world from a Kabbalistic point of view, the shattering of the vessel, and the unpredictable spread of these little dangerous and interesting pieces, and that this marriage, this coupling, this creation of a new life, of a couple and a new life, hopefully of more generations, is shards flying out into the trajectory of time in the universe.
So beautiful for both of you, and I'm so happy for you and your family. One thing that reminds me of what you've been sharing is that it says in Genesis that a man separates from his mother and father and attaches himself to his wife. So in that sense, there is this shattering of the nuclear family, of this man with his mother and father. And then that leads to the creation of a new unity. And as we know, as parents and family members, that aspect of shattering and then reconfiguring, bringing something new into the world is an ongoing dynamic. So thanks very much for bringing the notion about marriage and wedding. And Anna, do you have something you want to share? Yes.
Yeah, maybe not so ecstatic as that last sharing, but I'm thinking this picture that you've chosen is more than just color or shattering. It is it exists in time. It's like very fast. it indicates, it feels like something that's just happening quickly. But also, it's just horrifying to me personally, because this is what goes into what my mind sees, like when a microphone squeals or there's one of those electronic loud sounds. My mind sees colors and horrible bright lights when it hears loud sounds. And so for me, I'm just sitting here, I'm like almost shaking inside because this is such a horrible image.
So thank you. So let me just share one response, which is that I want to suggest that there's unintentional, like thoughtless breaking, and then there's thoughtful, intentional breaking. And the first kind can lead to harm and disaster. And what I want to suggest Joseph is doing here is a very thoughtful, strategic breaking. I mean, this is in keeping with both Joseph's own personality and that of his father, who Jacob in particular wavered back and forth between this kind of intentionality of breaking things and then these disastrous moments of breaking things. But in this moment, I want to suggest that Joseph is engaging in this very intentional act of separation and breaking in a therapeutic sense, in order to bring some new insight and new existence and a new unity into existence. Richard, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes, the picture of creation here with the water behind, the blue water, and the separation of the waters above and the waters below leads me to think on the term of breaking the waters at the onset of labor, that bringing life into the world. And about Joseph, you talk about Hanukkah as a family event, and Joseph is really rebirthing this family.
He is.
And it starts out, he's speaking harshly to them, he's playing games with them, he's doing this thing, he's testing them. Why? Because he has great compassion for them, and he wants to bring out their best. And they say, you know, you're spies, you're this, you're that, no, you don't. And what about this little brother? He doesn't say, where's the one that's not here? He doesn't try to humiliate them or play that game or play them. He knows that they're suffering, and he's giving them every opportunity to bring their best out. And then the thing that strikes me about Hanukkah is that Hanukkah's not a commanded thing that we're supposed to do. It's not one of the rituals that are given us compulsory to do in the Torah. The half Torah for this portion is Ezekiel. And I remember studying in Christianity in England and reading Paul about, you don't need the laws, you just need faith and love. Well, Ezekiel says, you know, you have to have ritual. And what is this ritual of Hanukkah? It's a family event. And it's that family and the ancestor worship, if you will, and the gathering around. That's what's not teaching kids about ethics. It's showing them love. And that's the love that stirs the God inside that they begin to be able to manifest as they come into the world. And it's all outside of the realm of compulsory certain acts and things you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to, how you're supposed to set the table and the rules of Judaism. Well, no, you're not going to get there with intellectual understanding. You're going to get there because you've been loved and you've learned to share that love. And that's what Hanukkah is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, and Dave, you want to share?
Namaste.
At the beginning, we see that the brothers did not recognize Joseph. And I started thinking about that. Why is that so? And remember when Joseph was sold into slavery, he was a young man. His face was probably smooth, and he spoke the accent of the tribe. Now he's living in Egypt many, many years later. He probably has a full beard, which he didn't have before. His clothes are different, and he probably speaks different.
13 years later.
He has changed tremendously. The rest of the brothers, they haven't changed very much. They just probably got a few years on them. That's the only difference. So we have one big change and one no change.
So, Paul, and go ahead.
Gary's had his electronic hand up for quite a while.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Thank you so much. Gary.
Thank you. Thank you. I have an observation and a challenge. The observation is in my downtime, I read Sports Illustrated and Batman comic books. And I noticed that in Rabbi's downtime, he reads Frontiers in Psychology. So I have to up my game here. The challenge is to me, and it's this quote from Jonathan Sachs, where he says the test of faith is whether I can make space for difference. And I absolutely agree with this. And I know that this is right, but it's interesting as I get older, I'm finding it more difficult. I'm kind of putting myself out there. I always feel confident and comfortable doing that with this group. One would think as you get older, if I believe this, then one would think as I get older, it should become easier. I can tolerate most differences, but I'm finding it more and more difficult to respect other differences. And I know that that's holding me back. And I'm not really sure, other than to maybe read more Jonathan Sachs and attend more Torah study, how I'm going to change. I want to change that, but it's a challenge.
Why do you want to change that, Gary?
I think that I can learn more if I'm more open to hearing when I'm chatting with someone and they have a difference of opinion. Sometimes I have an opinion and I feel so strongly about it that instead of really listening and grasping what they're trying to say, I'm forming a rebuttal. And I would rather hear exactly what they're saying and then disagree, but I just can't. I don't think there's any. I think there's more to be gained by listening and understanding what someone else's difference is, instead of me trying to win an argument. And
so, Gary, what you have just shared with us is a wisdom, and then it's just a matter of practicing the wisdom that you already know. And maybe part of it has to do with taking a breath.
Yes. That's a very good one. Yes.
You have to exhale though.
Yeah. Okay. All right, go ahead, Margot. Yeah.
Well, in my family, I saw something happen to my mother that was the exact opposite of Gary. My parents are from Russia. If I had married out of the faith, it would have been a great disaster. But my mother in her old age met my future daughter-in-law, who was Catholic, when my son was engaged to her. And my mother's response had nothing to do with her religion. My mother said, because our son is blonde. Oh, I'm going to have 2 blonde grandchildren.
Oh,
Totally accepting.
that's
And
beautiful.
yeah, it didn't bother her at all about the religion or her daughter, what will be her granddaughter-in-law. Yeah, she said, I'm going to have 2 blonde great grandchildren, and that was her response when she met her.
That's
so
beautiful.
Kind of just the opposite of Gary's.
And well, let me just wrap this together. Go ahead, Paul, and then I'll wrap it up.
This is the last part. I want to defend I think Gary got the point. I really enjoy the optimistic, the good stuff, how everything gets interpreted. But I still come up with the other stuff where basically you have Joseph, who understands his father is old and frail. And he also understands the meaning of his younger son, Binyamin, what it means to his father. And then he chooses to because of his knowledge, and also the good treatment. He was always the favorite son of the father. Yet he's the one that throws the dagger in the right to the center, so that there is the positive, stuff that I just heard all through. But I also noticed there's a trend in the Torah where the family that we come from, they have issues. That's my feeling.
They have issues, and I think these are meant to be, or to reflect back to us that within each one of us, there are these contending issues as well. So here's what you've all made me think about, which is this: is that Joseph is the moment when he meets his brothers, as Dave mentioned. He's unrecognizable. He has made himself unrecognizable, not only in that moment, but leading up to that moment. He looks like an Egyptian. He's married an Egyptian woman. He looks like he belongs in Pharaoh's palace, not out in the fields tending herds. So he has assimilated into the dominant Egyptian culture. When the family comes back with Jacob, he says, I'm going to have you separate from the rest of Egypt. You're all going to live in Goshen. And so there's now this separation that Joseph is encouraging. And then he has these two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And it's traditional on Friday night when parents bless children, if they're blessed with boys, the traditional notion is to say, and may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. The question is, why bless them that way? Why not say, may you be like Moses, or may you be like Joseph, or may you be like Reuben? Why Ephraim and Manasseh? So for one thing, Ephraim and Manasseh are each half of a total tribe, that tribe of Joseph. So Joseph has now been divided into two parts, Ephraim and Manasseh. So may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh is evoking the notion that there's a polarity involved. The second thing is that of all the figures representing the 12 tribes of Israel, Ephraim and Manasseh are the only ones born outside the land of Israel.
And their mother, half their ancestry is Egyptian, right?
And so the notion may be, first of all, that if you can emerge out of differentiation, out of exile, and rediscover the unity that you're a part of, that indicates that you have evolved and grown and have even greater strength than someone who has lived solely within the singularity of that family. And so my final suggestion to those who may be celebrating a wedding soon is that when the question about why are we breaking this glass and what does it mean, instead of giving an answer, say to the couple, think about it, and on your first wedding anniversary, share with us what you came up with in terms of what it all means. And I just want to say what this whole experience of studying with all of you means to me is that my own sense of this text and of the wisdom that's carried within it is constantly evolving. And it is because of the kind of conversation and sharing of perspectives that we do on a regular basis that allows me to grow and grow. And I'm so grateful. And God bless you all. And I look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Be well and happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.